Okay, AP Calculus, AP Computer Science A. This is the note sheet for Unit 2. We're actually going to start with the note sheet on Unit 2 and write down some notes, and then we're going to then create a working version of this. So this is Unit 2, which is the class model. And so we've talked a little bit about classes in Java. Everything belongs to a class, and objects belong to classes, like strings are objects. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to create our own objects. So I'm going to write some notes over here, and then we're going to kind of write more of what the code would look like. But over here is just more notes, and then we'll type all this up afterwards. So comment. So the big three are the private instance variables. I'm going to talk about what these mean. So, excuse me. Private instance variables are sort of like things that hold sort of qualities or properties of the object. Things that it has, what color it is, or whatever kind of object it is. It doesn't have to be a physical object. 2 will be the constructors. And the constructors are the things that allow you to create one of these objects. So we've been using constructors without even knowing it for like strings and things. But we can have different versions of the constructor. So there's a 0arg, which means it doesn't take any, you don't have to give it anything. And then there's also multi-arg constructors. And arg is for arguments. So meaning you give it information and then it uses that information to make an object. Number 3, a toString method. A toString method is a method that sort of makes a printable version of your object, something that you can print out on a screen using words and stuff. So it creates a string describing the object. And the toString mean if we have this method in here, then when we call system.out.println, and you just put the object inside that, it'll look for this to figure out how you want it to be printed out. The dynamic duo, this is just cute stuff. This isn't technical Java, little cute names. But there's things that we call getter methods, or a little more technical term would be accessor methods. If you get something or access something, it's like you have it. So this is a way to get to the information inside of an object from another class. And then we have setter or mutator, would be a little more of a fancy term, mutator methods. And that helps you set the values inside the private instance variables. It helps you actually change things about the object. The getters just get the information. Setters actually change the information that's true in it. The brain, public or private. So brain, you would think the thing that does thoughts and more complicated actions. So this is, we might call it processor methods. So methods that actually do jobs, that do something. Okay. This is where we have the algorithmic processing. So you have to, everything else is kind of straightforward, basic stuff, but this is where you might have something that's a little more of a job that's a little hard to figure out. Okay, so this does all the work. Everything else is just kind of stuff that needs to be there. Now we're going to save this room below this for something, but now we're going to go to the right side and actually write some example code of these things on the left. So so far we've been writing classes, and we write public class. And so for us, we're going to do a song object. So we have to do a capital letter for the first letter, the name of a class. And public, I'll just let you know now what this is. This is the visibility. And so if something's private, you could set it private. That means that it can't be seen or accessed from another class, which you might want. Now we're going to do our curly braces. And so usually what you do is you list the private instance variables. So let's say we have a song. And so these you usually want to be private. And you say what kind of variable it is. So I might use a string to maybe store the name of the artist of the song. Okay, so artist is the name of the variable. Now we usually don't initialize them here. So we just put the semicolon. All we're doing is declaring them, okay? So private is, and so usually these are going to be private. Okay, you should make them private unless there's some really good reason not to, but usually we're going to make them private instance variables. And what that does is that means that it's something that I only know. Now I mean the class itself. The class only knows what that is. And this also prevents the user from changing. So the user can't change this by setting it private. And so a lot of times you do want to build in sort of ways to protect what's in something. Okay, now let's do a couple more private instance variables. Private, I'm going to make this one another string, and this will be title. We're not going to put a value in it yet. I'll have another one, private. So you might think of this as a song that you can maybe purchase, you know, iTunes or whatever. So we'll give it a cost, double cost. Okay, so this, you know, price, you would probably want a decimal, right? So you could have dollars and cents. And we'll do one more, just to give us a variety of private instance variables. We'll do something that's Boolean. Okay, and then we'll say is downloaded. So a lot of times for Boolean variables, I use is something, whatever. So is downloaded. So this is the type of variable, right? And then these are the names of the variable. And all we're doing right now, with all of this right here is we're just declaring them. We are not initializing them. We're not giving them values. Okay? In this situation, we're not doing it. Okay? The next thing that would come would be constructors. These are the things that allow you to create a song object. So you have to put this in here, otherwise people can't create song objects outside of this class. So now the way the constructor looks, you guys haven't seen this before, is it says public. You want it to be public so that people can use it. And it's just the name of the class. It doesn't have class though, okay? And this would be a zero arg constructor because it doesn't take any arguments. Doesn't take any arguments. So you don't need any information to use this one. This will create kind of like a generic song, I guess. So a lot of times for the generic song, we will go ahead and set these all to the most generic value that you could set that kind of, you know, for instance, if it's an object of any kind, what strings are, we'll often set it to null. And so the title we could set to null. So it's kind of like we're creating a song, but there's no real information in it yet, but at least you can create it. Cost, good default value would be 0.0, and we usually write the point because it's double. And then for Boolean, usually you set them defaults if you're just trying to not give it any real values to start with. Okay, now you got to write small here because we're going to fit a lot of stuff on this page. So of course we would end our curly braces, and here we'd say end 0 arg constructor. Okay, in 0 arg constructor. Next, so a lot of times you'll lead with the 0 arg constructor, and a lot of times we'll have a 0 arg constructor, and a lot of times we'll have a multi-arg constructor. Now we could have as many constructors as we want. You can make all kinds of different constructors that would be used in different situations depending on the information that the user was giving you. It's public song, but here I'm going to list the arguments that I want to get from the user, and the order matters and the type of things matter. If you give the wrong type in the wrong order, it won't work. So you need to state what type of thing you're expecting, and then you need to give it like a temporary name that's only going to exist inside the constructor. So a lot of times I like to just give it a name that matches what I'm going to, I need an artist, title, cost, and is downloaded to make this song. So I'm going to call it initial artist, and I use camel notation because this is the very first value it has. You only use a constructor at the very beginning when you create a class. We could change these values later on. String initial title, and I'm just going to put it right here. We're going to say double initial cost, and then we're going to say Boolean initial is downloaded. Now you might think these are long, but they're very clear descriptive names. And then you got to close the parentheses. No semicolon here. So then a curly brace. Then what we do is we say, well, let's put these and assign them to all those values that they're supposed to go in. So we're going to say artist equals initial artist. And we're going to say title equals initial title. And we're going to say cost equals initial cost. And we're going to say is downloaded equals initial is downloaded. So now the order of these statements matters. If you do it the other way, if you say initial artist equals artist, well, that's going to put the artist into initial artist. So the order matters on these it's called, essentially what we're doing here is we're initializing, and even here, that's what we were doing. We were initializing the private instance variables. Okay, this is where initially, up here, we were not initializing, we were just declaring. Okay, so this is where we actually give them their first value in the constructor. So we're going to say end, instead of multi-arg, I'm going to say 4arg, because we had 4 arguments constructor. Because the truth is we could make one that only takes 3 arguments or 2 or something like that. So, just to be really clear, that's the end of the 4arg constructor. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is do the toString. Now, I'll say in the future, I usually would probably put this at the bottom of the class, not that it matters, but I'm just going to do it next because it was the next thing I listed. So most objects have a toString, and this allows you to give a nice printable version of your object. So I'm going to say public string toString, and they are usually 0arg methods, meaning they shouldn't require the user to give anything. This is the visibility. So you'll notice that we see this all the time. This is the visibility, which means that a user from another class can use this. They can't use things that are private. This is the type of thing that's going to be returned. This is going to be the return type. So that means that this method gives you something back, and it's going to give us a string. And this is the name of the method. And the empty parentheses indicate that it has 0 arguments. This is it. The constructors kind of look like a method, but they're not. But they kind of have some things that are like it. So in here, we say, okay, well, I want to, now for a method that's going to return something, you actually need something in here that says return. That means it's going to give something back. You got to have return. Now you might do some things and then return it at the end, and that's fine. But I think this is a simple enough job this time that we want a nice printable version of the song. And that means we might actually, make it descriptive and easy to read. So like I want to give the title, the artist title constant is downloaded, but I don't want to just print all those things out. Someone isn't going to know what they are. So I'm going to say something like, and this is where you could do it how you want, but I'm going to say song title, and then I'm going to leave a space after semicolon, and I'm going to say plus, and then I'm going to put title there. So we've done this kind of thing before with toStrings, where we combine actual strings with things that aren't necessarily strings. Now title is a string, and then we could say plus, and then we could do quotations, and maybe leave another space, and then a comma. We could say artist is, and put semicolon in space. Now you want to think about like where to put spaces so things aren't. I think actually here we would probably put the space after the comma. Okay, plus artist, and then we could keep going. We could put the price in there that is downloaded and all that stuff, and then we'd put a semicolon at the end. And then, so this is a really simple method. It just takes all that stuff and makes a nice long string out of it. Of course, we would say end method. This is a method, does a job, method toString. Just like we say in method main. So in method toString. Let's do some examples of getters and setters. So those are also methods. So we need to give it visibility. We want it to be public. If they're getters, then they're going to actually return something. So let's say it's going to return the title. So we're going to say, well, it's going to return a string then, right? And usually a good name for a getter is to be get the thing you're getting, get title. And they shouldn't take any arguments. It's just simply giving us information back from the object. So then we could say, okay, well, just return the title of the song. So remember, title is a private instance variable, so we can't get to it, but this gives us the access to it. Another name for getters are accessors. So we'd say end method, this is another method, get title. Now when we type this out, maybe we'll go ahead and do getters for all the private instance variables, which is not uncommon to have a getter for every private instance variable. And then in addition to getters, you probably have a setter for each private instance variable. So that's going to be public. Now setters don't return anything. They're going to take a value from the user and change the title. It's like a way of changing the title. So if it doesn't return anything, for the return type, we say void. Okay, so this doesn't return anything. Okay, so that's how we tell it to not expect anything. So we don't need a return statement. Public void, and then we need to give it a title. And if you're setting the title, you give it a name. We can say set title. Now, these generally need an argument. So we expect a string from the user, and we need to give it a temporary name. I'm going to call it new title. Something different, something that also communicates well what it is. And if you write these well, then it's easier for you to follow your own work and someone else looking at it. So then what we're going to do is we're going to take the title. Up here we set the title equal to the initial title, but now we're setting the title equal to this new title. So that will replace the previous value. Okay, and then of course we're going to do comment and method set title. And usually you would You probably have setters for all your privacy variables. Okay. Now, just as an example of like a processor method, that's something that actually does something. The getters, it's really basic. They give you information. The setters just change the values. But we might want to do something a little more complicated. So as an example, public, this is going to return a double because I'm going to do something with the price. I'm going to say like, I'm going to call it calc sale price. Calc sale price. Now, if there's a sale and we're trying to calculate the new price, then we probably need some information that tells us what the sale is. So let's say that we're going to receive a double that we want to call percent off. So let's say it's a 70% off sale. Well, then we're going to put 70.70 in there. Okay. And then in here, we want to return what the new sale price is. Now, we're not assigning it to the price, the cost, because we're going to keep the cost the same, but just temporarily, this will calculate what the sale price is and give it to the user in another class. So we're going to say, well, how would we do that? Well, return, there's some different ways we could do that. We could say it's going to be cost times parentheses 1 minus percent off. Right? I think that would correctly calculate it. And then we'd say end method calc sale price. So that's just a simple example of like a processor method. I mean, there's other ways we could do it. I think you could do cost minus percent off times cost, right? You might want to put parentheses around that. I mean, I think Java will do that multiplication first. Java does do some order of operations for you, but the parentheses wouldn't hurt. So I think that, that's another way of doing it. And then eventually we've done our whole class. So we're going to have an ending curly brace on the class, and we're going to comment an end class song. Okay. So this is just a quick, we're going to type this up though. We're actually use the same example. And I'm actually helping you do P2A, which is one of your assignments, but you actually get it done with me. Okay. Or most of it. So now after you create a class, you often want to test it. You want to see if it works, and see if the getters work and the setters work, the constructors and the toString, and just make sure everything actually works. So what we do is we need another class to essentially test this, and we often call that a driver class. Okay. So we're going to write that right here. So generally in any assignment I give you to write a class, I'm also going to ask you to write a driver class to kind of like test it out, see if it works. You'll find out sometimes things don't work. So this is a class itself, and I'm going to call it song driver. So usually what I name the driver class is whatever the class name is with driver. Now we start with a capital letter, use camel notation. Okay, now what we want to try in here is we want to try and create some songs, try the 0R constructor out, try the multi-R, try them both out. Try the getters, try the setters, try the toString, try the processing. So I'm not going to necessarily have everything on here, but we do have to have a main method also to run this. So this is where public static void main string args. Okay. So now you know what public means, right? That's the visibility of it. Main is the name of it. That's the visibility of it. So eventually we'll learn what you know what void means now too, right? Void means it's not going to return anything. It's a method that doesn't return anything. Well, I'm not going to talk about static yet. So what we want to do is create some variables of song type. So we just created this new class. We can actually create songs. It's capital S. And you want to create a variable, maybe I could call it my song 1 or something. And then we could just initialize at the same time. This is different. I'm not doing all the constructors and private instance variables in here. This is just a class to try and create some of these other objects in. You have to use the word new, like I talked about using on strings, even though Java is lazy and lets you not do that on strings, but you're going to have to do it on everything else. So if I use a 0R constructor, I need to say new song, empty parentheses. So this says, okay, let's look for that one. And Java knows to use that constructor. Whereas here on a second example, I can say, well, I'm going to create another song, my song 2, and I'm going to use the multi-R constructor. So I'm going to say new song, and I'm going to give it. Now you got to remember what things it needs, and it has to be given in the right order, just to make sure it's assigned to the right things. I mean, artist and title are both strings, so you could possibly mix them up, but then the title will be given to artist and artist will give you the title, which you don't want. But if you try and put a double first here, it's going to try and put it into the string and you'll get an error. So I'm going to say my artist is the Beatles, and I got to put quotations around it so that Java knows that that's a string and not, otherwise it's going to look for variables with those names. Comma, the name of the song, I'm going to say yesterday, and I got to put quotations around that, and then I give the price, $1.99, and then I got to give the status of whether it's downloaded or not, and I'll say true. Okay, so there, that just created that song. Now, hopefully that works. So one of the ways to test it out, this helps you test out a couple things. Let's print it out. System.out.println. Now, what we could do is we could call the toString method to give us back a nice version of the song. And so when you call a method from a class on an object of that class, usually what you do is you say my song 1, you put the name of the object, and then you do a dot toString. Okay, and then that would give us back a printable version of the song, and then it would print it out. Now, we use this dot thing a lot. We've been using it, math.random. Well, random is a method in the math class, so we call it math, okay? System.out, right? So this is how you call methods from within a class. You've got to have an object of that type, dot, name of the method. Okay, so this will print out that first song. Now, by the way, another way of doing it, and this is the way I want you to do it in the future, because that's one of the conveniences of having a toString, is that you could just say song 1. You could just put song 1 in there, and Java will look for the toString. Now, if you have a method that creates a string of the object but isn't called toString, well, that's fine. You could do it like this. But specifically, the name toString, Java will look for that if you just put an object inside of a statement like this. Okay? Now, when we do this, it's going to print it out, which will, one, show you if your toString works. But then it'll also show you if these values went into the right spots and if your object was created correctly. We also might want to test out our getters and setters. We might want to test out our processors. I'm not going to write all that here. This is more just a template to help us, but we're going to write some more stuff down. So if we wanted to, let's see if we can get a sale price. So on my song 2, I'm going to say dot calc sale price. Now I'm supposed to give it a double, so we got to know what the sale price is. So I'm going to say it's half off, so I'm going to give it 0.5 and then close it and then put a semicolon. Now, it doesn't actually assign this value to anything. It calculates it and then prints it out. So sometimes we might actually take these values and assign them to something else. So then, of course, the end, you got to end your closing brace, end method main, and then end class song driver. So this is a driver. This allows us to practice seeing if our song class does everything we want it to. And sometimes the toString will look weird and you'll realize you need an extra space somewhere or something like that. So you deal with it then. Okay, so we're going to, I'm going to end this video, and our next activity will be going ahead and typing this all up. So if you have this with you, that might help make it go a little quicker. In fact, you could start right now without me, but I'll do it with you guys. And this will actually be P2A, so you can name it P2A project. And but I'll show you how to do that in the next video.